Hello and welcome to our Head Teacher Chat podcast. I'm really delighted to be joined by Hannah Carter today. It's going to be a wonderful conversation. I just read her book a couple of weeks ago and it's actually going to be a game changer for school leaders. So welcome, Hannah.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
And today we're just going to go into the insights of your journey into headship, what you learned, and basically talking about the book. Would you like to give us an introduction to yourself and your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been, obviously, I started as a trainee in a kind of pretty deprived school in the Hastings area. Very quickly realised that was absolutely my passion, working with disadvantaged students in challenging circumstances and schools in challenging circumstances. Remained kind of in that East Sussex area, have had 2 substantive headships in that time, kind of done assistant principal, head of English, vice principal, the usual route. Really enjoyed both of those experiences. One of them, unfortunately, was during COVID. But yeah, had a really great time and really enjoyed leading schools. Took a step back from that in October to the book that you reference is one of 5 books. So there's a series and they follow every career stage in education. So they start with the Honest ECT and they move up towards the book that you've read, which is the first one that's out, The Honest Headteacher. And have been doing consultancy work, school improvement work since then, which has been really nice because I've had the opportunity to visit all sorts of different types of school. Been on a bit of a personal pilgrimage in that kind of had reached a stage where I was a bit disillusioned with the system, as it were, the comprehensive school system, and wanted to explore what alternative models were out there. So had the privilege of visiting a Steiner school, visited a Ruskin Mills school, met with kind of thought leaders in those types of alternative models of education, visited some special schools, and I think, went on a bit of a journey that led me back to the conclusion that actually we have got it right. The system just needs really great leaders in it. And actually, it's about leadership of that system. It isn't about, completely. It's not about a complete revolution, but it's also not about tweaks. It's about somewhere in the middle, and it's about good people remaining in the system and ensuring that it serves all of the students.
Yeah, absolutely. So we totally agree, and so we've been on a similar journey over the last couple of years, and meeting loads of fabulous head teachers and school leaders around the country. And we come to the same conclusion. Actually, it's about getting the leadership right and supporting those leaders in school. So it's really interesting. And that's what you're basically going to in your book. Do you want to explain? It's a great book. It really is. I recommend any new head teacher getting this book because it tells you everything that you need to know for school leadership. I think I could have written this book, but I'm glad that Hannah has. So do you want to tell us about the mission of the book and why you wrote it and everything about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been working for a while doing the odd piece of kind of writing with Andy McHugh, who works for Teacher Writers and does kind of all sorts of things around that. So I'd had a few articles and bits that we've been developing. And I was always brought back to this concept of authenticity and this concept of honesty and the fact that, leadership in schools is hard, but incredibly rewarding. And I think that there's a real mismatch between necessarily the formal training or the offer that there is in terms of being a head, and then what that actually looks like on the ground day to day, and how you day to day retain all of the values that led you there. And I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding sometimes in education that a good teacher makes a good head teacher. And there is such a difference between being an excellent teacher, and of course head teachers need insight in terms of pedagogy, and of course they need to be up to date with the curriculum, and they need to be good teachers, but the skills that are required to lead a school are actually leadership skills. And I think there's very little offered and often staff find themselves promoted into leadership positions because they're good in the classroom and they're good teachers, not necessarily because they're good leaders. And so we have this kind of layer of leadership in schools that maybe isn't as well versed or as skilled as it could be. And I think that's where sometimes schools struggle. So the book is about kind of my honest reflections about what headship looks like, from my perspective, ways, tips, tricks, things that you can do to kind of establish yourself, and then how you build a team around you, how you grow other leaders, what your role is as a head teacher in real terms. So it's raw, it's honest, it's hopefully amusing in parts. There are days as a head where you just want to know that someone out there also has spent all day dealing with toilets. You just there are moments where you want to reach out and have a human connection. And so I think, from my perspective, this book and the whole series of books are just about offering a bit of an authentic human take on something that people often don't, that they worry about talking about. People worry about admitting things that are hard, don't they?
Yeah.
And then they burn out and they leave. And that's really sad.
Yeah, and that's basically where head teacher chat tried to come in, is actually we don't want anyone to feel isolated. We don't want, because it can be an isolating job because of many reasons. And so we want to try and support people and help people. And you followed head teacher chat for many years, and you've known some of the questions, and actually they're honest questions from people who are in the job and they think, oh, how do I do this? Where do I go for this support? I mean, no one gives you a sort of a manual for the headship. The first day, Lucy will tell you the story is, so when she was acting head for the first day, the water pipes broke.
Always plumbing related. Literally, I could be a plumber with the things I've learned.
Yeah, and there's so many stories like that. It's it's plumbing related or something like that. You had to close the school, and you basically no, you didn't in some ways close the school, but you had to sort out lunchtime because you had no water for lunchtime, so you had no cooking. So you had all these different, and no one teaches you how to do that.
No, and in that moment, everyone looks to you to be, calm, in control, to be, directive, to be owning the situation, to be leading and managing something that is well beyond your lived experience. And I think, like I said, that's where the book comes in. There's a lot of the book is about how you reflect on those experiences and how you use those moving forward to shape how you respond to those circumstances and situations. And it can feel really lonely, sitting in that chair for the first time and realizing there's 2,000 children, a whole community of parents and hundreds of staff all expecting you to know how to do everything. It's a lot, and I think if you don't have if you're not naturally gifted with those type of leadership skills, it can be really, like I said, it can be really tricky. I personally loved it, really enjoyed being a head, absolutely loved it, but there were moments where I was just like, what? there are moments when you're just like, I don't know anything about sub pumps. 1 second, let me just Google it. What's a sub pump? And I think that is so far from being, I was a great English teacher, really great, and I ended up being a good head teacher as well, but nobody prepared you. I know you have NPQHs and stuff, but
they don't really tell you about what you have to do for asbestos checks and things like that. And actually some of those things are, you get onto your phone and you go, okay. And then all the other things that the HR issues, the way to do those.
Managing staff that are pregnant and staff that have bereavements and, changing the timetable and people leaving and, all of those things, recruitment, especially in the schools down the sort of schools that I've worked in, recruitment's a massive challenge. And unless you're somebody that's particularly skilled in recruitment, that's hard. But, hopefully the book gives people a steer and gives people a sense that they aren't on their own, and gives people, some lighter moments as well at the end of the day, when you just think, hopefully they flick to the book and have a little laugh at the time that I was made into a cat for a TikTok. My first week as a tip.
And that's the important part of the book, and it's an important part that what we've got to do to support head teachers, really, isn't it? It's actually saying you're not alone. Everyone deals with these things. We all deal with the same sort of things, don't we? In every school in the country, it's more or less a similar thing in different contexts. So you might have different issues and things like that, but essentially you're leading the school.
And I think therein probably lies the necessity of quality of leadership support in MATs. Most schools are part of a MAT now, and the vehicle of a MAT can be hugely powerful in that sense. You're all on the same team. There's no sense of competition. It isn't, you're not talking to local heads that are also competing for kids in the same catchment area. There's not all of that kind of undertone to it. And so they should be really solid networks of head teachers, and then, executive or director roles that actually really support those heads. And I think, I would say from my nomadic experience since last October of being in all these different schools, I can see where it works and where it doesn't. And I can see some really great examples of MATs. I don't know if I'm allowed to name them. Like, TCAT does a really good job of that. The heads have a real sense of camaraderie. They support each other. They go into each other's schools. The directors are very present. They're all ex-head teachers themselves. There's a real sense that there's that network of leadership there, of like leadership that you can lean on, as it were, and learn from. Whereas, there are some MATs, and I definitely won't name the ones that there aren't, but there are some MATs where head teachers are just left to it, and that level of leadership just becomes QA and just becomes, a tick box exercise rather than actually a supportive mechanism for heads. And I think that's a shame, and that could be looked at.
Yeah, and we have similar experiences of that type of thing, and actually the isolating of what's happening around schools and things like that. So going back to the book, it's so like I love the first couple of chapters, or the first chapter that talks about the first 100 days, first 50 days in a job, and what you need to do, because we get that question so often on our channel. They say, I'm just starting. We got it at the moment. It's like, I'm starting after Easter. What do I do? How do I start?
Yeah, and it's always an interview question as well, isn't it? How is your impact in your first 100 days? It's an old classic. And I do think it is about authenticity. I'll bring it back to that. I think that, there can be a real pressure and rush in the early stages of a headship to make a mark, to do a thing, to have a new set of vision or values, to make new posters, to brand up the school in a way that reflects your leadership. And I think that's really, I understand it as a go-to mechanism, and I understand it from a new head's perspective, but it's a really unwise way of entering a community. And I think there's such power and strength in listening and really understanding before you do anything, because the last thing that people want is something imposed on them. Like, real leadership is collaborative. Everybody knows that. Real authentic leadership is about sharing a vision and a journey and co-creating it. You can't do it on your own as a head. You just can't. And I think lots of heads feel this pressure to arrive and fix, instantly things. And I think it's about small wins. The book talks about in those early stages, it's about showing that you're there for the long run. It's about embedding yourself in the community. It's about, listening, like really properly listening, not student council, but actually getting into the dinner hall and talking to the student that would never normally put themselves forward for student council, and actually hearing their lived experience of the school, you know, and meeting your middle leaders and taking them on tours of their own departments and asking them about, you know, what you're going to see when you walk in the room, and getting a gauge of their own knowledge of their own teams. You know, it's all about all of that kind of prep work and groundwork. I think it's a real I've been given all sorts of advice over the years, especially because I'm young and female. People think, you know, I'm asking for it. Advice, just so we're clear. And you know, I've been told so many times, walk in like you own the place, walk in with gravitas, you know, make yourself, stamp your impression upon the school immediately, tell the staff, you know, and it's rubbish. Like, no one wants that. That's absolute nonsense advice. Like, maybe that works for like a grey man in a grey suit in like 1987, but now people don't want that. They want authentic leadership. They want to feel heard. Like, that's not leadership. That's a poster. Anyone can make a new set of visions and values. If nobody actually believes in them, what's the point of having them? Like, and I think for me, this book is very much about encouraging authenticity. And I don't mean it's the balance between authenticity and professionalism. And I think people sometimes struggle with that. They hear authenticity or honesty and they think that means unfiltered, and it doesn't. It doesn't mean unfiltered. It doesn't mean going to work and cry in staff briefing or stomp down the corridor when you're in a bad mood. You know, you're still the leader of that school. It means authentically listen, like, and authentically engage with the professional side of the school. Like, I don't mean be friends with everyone. And, you know, I have done a few of like the teacher talk radio and a few things about staff well-being, and you know, it always comes out top, doesn't it? Staff want to feel valued and heard, and they want an authentic leader. They don't want a donut. Like, they're grown-ups, they can buy a donut if they want one. Like, what they actually want is to go to work and feel like somebody's listened to them and somebody's interested in their development and somebody's acknowledges the great things that they've done. And I think, again, those early days are about those relationships and setting the tone for your leadership. And that doesn't have to be aggressive. You know, that can be kind, like kind leadership. And I think, you know, authenticity and kindness are really sometimes underplayed or undervalued. I hate the term soft skills. Like, they're not soft. There's nothing soft about being kind. You can be kind and hold people to account. Like, you can do both. And I think that's an important part of the book and the writing as well. You know, it's about being kind to yourself and being kind to everybody else, because we're all people. You know, I've very rarely met a teacher that isn't there for the right reasons. You know, teaching isn't a profession that draws, you know, it's not insurance. It doesn't like draw people in for the money or the glamour or the, you know, generally if an adult is in that building, it's because they want to do right by the kids, but maybe they just don't know how, you know, and it is actually about empowering them to do their job well. And of course, there'll be times when it's not easy, like it's so not easy. And there'll be times where you do have to really firmly hold people to account. But one of the biggest compliments I ever received was one of my ex-deputy heads, who's a HMI now. She gone to the dark side. We don't speak, no, we do, but not about Oxford. She said to me, "Do you know what, Han? When I worked for you, I didn't always agree with exactly what you did, but I always agreed with exactly why you did it."
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if the community, the students, the staff really genuinely believe that you authentically make decisions entirely based on the best for the children, then people will support you in your leadership. And when you have to make tough decisions and you have to do things that aren't great, you know, I've led restructures, I've done, you know, I've dismissed people. It's, you know, that is all part of the job. But if you do it with authenticity and kindness, then actually people recognise that it isn't personal and that that's just a part of your role.
And that's important, actually, because I mean, we get so many questions in the community about those sort of things, and the top topic is all about staff wellbeing. It's every month. What comes out is actually how you treat staff and everything around that, and it's quite interesting, some of the responses to that. And there's a range of different responses, but essentially it's actually how can the staff trust you and how you do those things, how you lead things with kindness. There's some things that staff will never know about your role. There is decisions that you have to make and not really share all the information and how you made it and things like that. And it's hard sometimes. So how do you balance that with well-being of the school leader and of the school? Because in the book it talks about that quite extensively.
Yeah, I think it's always about bringing it back to the children. You know, we run a school for children. Our careers are in service of the education and well-being and future of young people. And I think if every decision that you make, every step, you know, that you take that might have consequences, you know, that might be a difficult decision, that might be something that weighs heavily, I think if it's always brought back to that central purpose of what's best for the children, like what's best for the community we serve, then people understand it. They might not agree with it, but they understand it. And, you know, I have a colleague of mine that's the CEO of Hamwick Trust. And they end, every time they look at a new policy or they think about a big decision, they always end their meetings with a question, which is, what about Sam? And that's like their trust motto, what about Sam? And that Sam represents the child we've forgotten. You know, what is the impact of this decision on Sam, on the end user, as it were a business? And I think if people can see that in your day-to-day, everything that you do, you know, then, like I said, they will understand maybe not what you've done, but why you've done it. And you're right, there's a huge amount you just can't share. You just can't. But actually part of being ahead is signing up for that, is recognizing that weight or that kind of responsibility is one of the things you get paid for, is to hold that. And it's how you hold it, isn't it? And it's how you as a leader own it without allowing it to consume you, you know, and how you recognize that it's separate from who you are. You know, some staffing decisions are really hard. You know, like I said, I've done that, and it's really hard. The person in front of you is a person with a whole life, and, you know, decisions that you make impact on that life. But actually, they're an adult with a support network, and if you do it authentically and kindly, it is something you have to be comfortable with holding. And I think that's probably where the network of support comes in. You know, in terms of a trust, it can be, again, really valuable. And where colleagues like HR people come in, you know, they are privy to often to the level of information that you hold. And, you know, we're paid by taxpayers for children at the end of the day. You know, it's a transaction, isn't it? You know, we do receive funding to give them the best possible education. If that's not happening for whatever reason, then it's sort of your job to make sure it is in your school.
Yeah, very true. So
that sounds mean.
That answered the question of the personal well-being. It's actually in the book it goes into much more detail about that, and it's very good and very explanatory. So what would be the one bit of advice you would say to a new head teacher? Just you talked about the 50 days, but we have a lot of new head teachers come onto our platform and say, okay, what advice would you give them? What would the one bit of advice you give to a new head teacher?
I'd give them the anti-advice to a piece of advice that I've had a number of times. So the advice I've had would be walk in like you own the place. My advice would be don't walk in like you own the place. You don't own the place. Walk in like you've been given and entrusted with this incredible opportunity, and be humble. Like nobody talk to the caretaker, talk to the site staff, talk to the receptionist, like understand from their perspective the school, like, give batteries to the person whose clock's not working, like recognize all of their days and their experiences. Like, don't walk in like you own the place, because you 100% don't, and nobody likes that guy. Like, you don't need it either. People are smart enough to see through that. Like, it's arrogant and it's rude.
That's good advice. That is such good advice, and and it's so true. And that, be humble in the situation of it, and feel like
grateful for the role. It's an incredible opportunity. Like, to be entrusted. I always say at open evening to year 6 parents, I can't give you certainties about the next 5 years. I absolutely can't. There'll be lots of things that will change. There'll be lots of things that will develop. But the one thing I can promise you is that I will always, when I'm making a decision about or communicating with your child, I will always do and behave and speak and be the way I would want someone to for my child. Like, I will always see it through that lens. I've got 2 kids, and I know I look so young. And I, it's the lighting. No, and I always will treat the children in my school the way I would want my daughter treated. And that fundamentally is it, isn't it? If parents are trusting you with that many hours of their children, with their most precious thing in the world, like your child, if they are trusting you in their absence to guide their child, what a privilege. Like, what a job. Like, there isn't a bigger privilege that you can be given, is there, than being a head teacher?
No, and I remember with my children going to the year 6 for the presentation, and the head teacher said the same thing, and it sold it for us in some ways. Actually, if he had any on display, he had a photo of his boys, and I just went, that's right, this is the right place. So your reflection on leadership in education and the future of leadership, because in some ways we're in a very changing world at the moment. There's a lots going on with outside of education. What do you? Yeah, well, you got a new curriculum review, haven't you, coming through?
Yeah.
So that's going to make some changes and going to have an impact on head teachers, isn't it? And maybe. Well,
I think I'm always skeptical until I actually see it, like the concrete, what's the actual impact going to be? Because if you already have a balanced, broad curriculum that's incredibly inclusive, that serves your community, that means that children move on to the destinations with the keys to unlock whatever life they want. Like, if you fundamentally know that, if your staff are adaptive thinkers that approach children as individuals, and you already offer all of that, then you stand behind it, don't you? Like, not if you're the head and that's your curriculum you're committed to, and it's serving your children in your community in the way that you want and need it to, then
there's no need.
Then all right, curriculum review. Like, and also there's so many tweaks and stuff. Like, I know there's like a lot of stuff going on, but I don't know how much of it ever lands. Like, you've got to wait for it to land. If you actually think back over the last 10 years about some of the things that have been hyped as like meaningful impact and then haven't really made much difference. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously Progress 8 was a biggie, like, but beyond that, like, it's quite hard to think back and think about what's actually do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's just noise, isn't it? Right. And I think part of being ahead is about being skeptical and drowning out that noise a little bit. And of course, society, absolutely, I agree with you. Like wider society, you know, I am a DSL. I've just been appointed as a trustee for the new independent safeguarding body that are there to support DSLs, which I feel really passionately about. Safeguarding something that, you know, I have worked with for a long time. And I think therein are the challenges, therein are the differences. The things that are happening in society and culture will be the challenges for the heads, not the fiddling that the government are doing, like, or Ofsted. Like, their fiddling is, when you compare it to the mental health crisis in young people, is pretty irrelevant, like, in terms of challenge. Do you know what I mean? Like, as a real head in a real school, your challenge is a sudden spike in self-harming, and the kids that, you know, primary school kids that access Pornhub and think it's regular and think that that's what a meaningful intimate relationship looks like. And your challenge is, you know, the families that don't value education anymore and so don't send their kids to school, you know, and undermine the sense that education means something. You know, all of those challenges are the real changes and challenges, rather than, you know, a scorecard or whatever. Like, I'm quite dismissive. I probably should be more interested in those things, but they come and go, right?
They are the noises around it, and I totally agree with you with the other challenges as well. But in the context of where we are now, is sort of like, what about leadership then? What's the future for leadership? What do you see happening to support head teachers more with everything that's going on? Then what do you see the future being?
I think that, do you want to talk utopia or real? Let's go utopia. That's nice. Let's go for, like, what would be the dream? So I think that, you know, the recognition of the things that are happening in society and the gaps that schools are filling and the challenges that head teachers are facing in terms of serving the young people and giving them the level of intervention and support that they need to navigate, you know, a complex, ever-changing world. I think that head teachers need to have the ability to direct resource to that, and they need the access to other professionals that are specialists in those areas. Because for me, at night as a head, I'm not laying awake thinking about the new scorecard. I'm laying awake thinking about Johnny in year 8 and how worried I am about the prevent referral I made, and whether actually they're going to do anything about that, and whether actually your prevent referral was the right thing. Am I criminalising that dangerous behaviour and pushing him further underground? Is it linked to his SEN needs? Are they met? Are they unmet? Is he diagnosed? You know, they're the things, aren't they, that keep you awake at night as a head. It's the kids, it's not the stuff. And I think head teachers need access to a better, quicker set of professionals to support them in that. You know, as a head, I prioritised over other things spending money on mental health resources, on counsellors, on interventions around self-esteem, around masculinity, all of those things. But they're not cheap, and that is at the expense of other things. You know, I would like to do both. I would have wanted to have done both. The money that I spent on those things, because I prioritised them, I would have loved to have also spent on a programme to enrich STEM, and I would have loved to have got, you know, university mentors in, and, you know, really thought about our most able and whether we're directing and encouraging them into, you know, red bricks, or whether, you know, pupil premium is the same as it was. If free school meals looks the same, it doesn't anymore. Let's be honest, since the pandemic, free school meals and pupil premium, the things that we used to associate with that, I think, are probably gone. There's lots of families that qualify for pupil premium and free school meals where both parents are working, and there is literature in their home, and their kids do have a reading age above their chronological age. And actually those things aren't, those assumptions that we tie to PP aren't true anymore, because half of society, if not more, isn't managing financially. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's all of that. It's the social stuff, it's the community stuff, it's the stuff that's happening in society. And I think, as a head, it's incredibly frustrating because you know them best, you know your community, you know what they need, but you can't afford it or access it. And so it feels like you're fighting with your hands tied behind your back. And I think if whoever, I don't know who's in charge of it, Jesus or whatever, but whoever's in charge of the future of headship, they need to really think about resourcing schools properly in those areas if they want to help heads. It's that simple, isn't it? No one wants to pex a student, no one wants to exclude a student, but if you don't have the provision to help that student, like, you're stuck. And I don't think any head goes to school and thinks, oh, if I get an SEMH pupil premium boy in year 8 today does something really bad and I can send him home. Like, they don't. Like, just think
So those are the sort of things we need to solve to make it a more attractive thing for school leaders. But actually, that's the things that people think. The safeguarding, the SEN crisis, and that is basically what is said in the community all the time. It's one of the top issues of a child not coping in school. How do we deal with this? And it's all those things. And from my experience of the head, it was those things. There was no services to go and help, and you had to try and fix it within schools. So then the pastoral side, you put more money into it, but the negative side of that was actually less support in class or less something else. It wasn't. It's juggling.
You were always robbing Peter to pay Paul as a head, and it's just not adequate. Like, the funding that schools get just isn't adequate to meet the need, like the level of need. Pardon?
It's gone down in real terms. It's gone down year after year after year, and it hasn't got.
And I think when we talk about kind of headship and we talk about the things that are challenges and the things that you keep to yourself and the things that you hold as the head and you don't communicate and you don't share because there's no need to make everybody as miserable as you is a large part of that is about finances. It really is. It's the financial implications of the decisions that you make. And I think it's not about decisions about uniform or policies or how to do a lockdown procedure, or it's, oh my gosh, I need £4,000 for the boiler. That £4,000 is going to have to come out of the enrichment money. Like, where's the, they're the things that are like heartbreaking. Or when you've got like a really excited ECT2 standing in front of you saying, I've got this really great idea. I want to make a community garden. I want to do seed to table approach. Like, I want to get a group of pupil premium kids whose attendance is low and get them, and you have to go, that's great, but we can't afford like the soil or the veg beds or the, like, and you're thinking, you're racking your brain thinking, is there a school credit card? How much is on that? Can I go to B&Qs? Like, the amount of times you just buy stuff, don't you, yourself as the head? Like, you do.
I've gone down to B&Q and just bought the soil myself and just went, okay, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I probably have bought over the years 1 million pairs of tights. Like, you do, don't you? You just.
I haven't done that.
You haven't done that.
No, I haven't done that.
No, but you do. You just get to a point where you just think, oh, like, I'll just do it. Like, and that's. No one goes into headship to be rich. Like, I'm not being funny. It's not like we're all like Alan Sugar, like living our best lives. Like, we've all got mortgages and stuff. And, my husband's eyebrows are raised every time he sees, an online order for tights and wonders why I want 80 pairs of ties.
It was a pen for me.
I used to say
pens and pencils. I used to buy all the stationery and just say, just
have it. It's not worth it. Yeah.
Not worth the argument. Oh, we haven't got pens. Yeah. Okay, I just go and buy pens.
It's also but the thing is, the bigger that school gets, the harder that gets. And actually, fundamentally, it's wrong, isn't it? Like it's rubbish to be having those conversations with the maths department about their calculators when kids are having to share. But do you pay a school counsellor to deal with the fact that you've got loads of kids that are self-harming and the CAMS wait list is so long that you fear one of them will do something daft before they get any intervention? Or do you let the maths department have one calculator per child? I mean, it's not cool.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for this insightful conversation today. It's been brilliant, and it's been lovely to actually finally meet you and discuss all about leadership and all the things. And very good luck with the book, because it is actually a really good book for anyone who's in school leadership. It does tell you what it's like and everything about the nuts and bolts of how to do it and things like that. So I would recommend it to anyone.
It's very kind of you. Thank you.
It is what we need in some ways for school leaders to read before they go into the role of a headship, and actually to understand some of those different parts of that role. So good luck with the book, and thank you very much for our conversation today. I hope you'd enjoyed it.
I have. Thank you very much for having me.
You're more than welcome.
Have a lovely rest of the day.